Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of the Infertile Diagnosis. I'm your host, Monica Cox, and welcome back to another episode of the Infertile Diagnosis. On this episode of the Infertile Diagnosis, we have a special guest, Melissa from Endo Empowered. Now, Melissa has endometriosis, and for many years, she just dealt with it with surgeries, painkillers, and hormone treatment. Melissa was finally fed up with this lifestyle, and luckily there was people around now talking about how diet and lifestyle can have a huge impact on your health, including endometriosis. Now, we all know this is not a curable disease, but what we do know now is that you can manage your symptoms through diet and lifestyle. And Melissa is an amazing example for this. She now runs an online course using her REACH technique. She's empowering women to reach beyond endometriosis by using a holistic approach. I truly love Melissa's story and how she is a shining example how you can take control of your health, be your own hero, and thrive even if you have a condition like endometriosis. I had the pleasure of meeting Melissa when I was back in New Zealand a few weeks ago, and she is truly on a mission to inspire and help every woman out there who is ready to take control of their endometriosis symptoms. So without further ado, here's Melissa. Hello and welcome back to the Infertile Diagnosis. Today we have on Melissa, who, is it okay if I call you an endometriosis expert?
Sure. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your diet, your lifestyle, who you were in your younger years.
So I began my journey with endometriosis at 19 years of age. I basically developed instant pain when I got my period at roughly 13 years of age, and just thought that was normal, as many women with endometriosis do. And you go through life thinking that period pain and kind of abdominal pain is just part of being a woman. And in a way, I was fortunate in that I actually developed a bladder infection when I was 19, and they gave me antibiotics for the bladder infection, and then the pain afterwards never actually went away. So that made me kind of dig in a little bit deeper and try and figure out what was going on. And that's when they discovered the endometriosis. So some women take up to 10 years to get a diagnosis, but I was quite fortunate in that I got my diagnosis very early. Unfortunately, that also meant that I went down a very long journey with following the conventional approaches for endometriosis. So I went through 7 surgeries. I took every hormone treatment they could think of. I stuck things in my arm. I took the pill for 7 years. I literally tried, everything, things up my nose, you name it. I tried it. And none of it really offered me the relief. And so that's when I went on a mission to try and figure this out on my own, because I really thought I'd exhausted all my options in terms of that. And I was still living on painkillers, so it wasn't really helping me.
Yeah, and the doctors obviously didn't have any good advice. I mean, was there not anyone out there,
They offered symptom relief. And generally, that's what most doctors tend to focus on. So you go in, you say, I have pain, you get a painkiller. You have endometriosis, they will try and stop the growths of the endometriosis, but they don't really look at or potentially understand what triggers the growths or why they're there or how to reduce those growths from happening. So it's very much a symptom control type of approach, which is okay, I mean, that's generally what we expect. But yeah, I didn't feel that even that was helping me enough. I felt like I was still in pain. And, I remember actually when I went in to see my gynae, he gave me something called Synarel, which is a it's a brand name, but essentially it was something that you squirted up your nose, and it stopped the pituitary gland from fully functioning. So essentially it was stopping, ovulation and the things that would trigger the endometriosis from growing was having too much estrogen. So that was kind of the idea behind that. And I remember not having any pain during that 6-month period and absolutely loving this stuff that I was squirting up my nose. But when I got to the end of the 6 months, my gynae said to me, look, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to come off that now because, it's been 6 months. And I remember begging him and saying, look, please, this is the only thing that's really helped me. Please, can you, maintain this for me? And he said, look, I can, but you would be risking your bone health, and this may lead to osteoporosis later in life. And to be honest, it was such a shock at the time because I wasn't somebody who read the little fine print on all the things that I was given. I literally just trusted my doctor and trusted whatever they said. I was, young. I was in, my early 20s. Didn't even question that they wouldn't necessarily look at my whole body and the consequences of all these treatments. And so that was sort of my first inclination that, hey, there's actually always going to be side effects to a lot of these treatments. And depending on how much you're prepared to put up with is, kind of the give and take of that, So yes, you can take painkillers, but they might interfere with your digestive health. And, yes, you can take these hormone treatments, but they might interfere with your bone health or your mental health or any number of other factors, because estrogen and progesterone and all those wonderful hormones, they don't just focus on your ovaries. They actually have a lot of other jobs in the body. And, by just shutting them down, we actually don't know what effects they're going to have on us long term. So, and that was my first kind of, ooh, this is interesting kind of moment.
Yeah. And I think it's funny, I'm just getting this flashback. On TV. So I'm originally from America, but I lived over in the UK for 14 years, you being from South Africa and living in New Zealand. Outside of America, you don't really get this, but in America, on their commercials for any of these medications for endometriosis or migraines or whatever, I mean, half of the commercial is the list of side effects that these medications are going to give you. Yeah. And I mean, I remember it happening when I was younger. I was 22 when I moved away, and now I'm, 30, almost 38. And I'm sitting there now with a new head on my shoulders going, who the fuck would take this? There's gotta be a better way, right? There's gotta be a better way. But we go into our doctor's office and we trust them, and we should be able to trust them. And I think we can trust them because they are only doing, I would hope, the best that they know of.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I actually went through quite a few years of almost being quite angry with the system and sort of feeling quite let down. But then I realized, well, it's just a different approach. It's not looking at the body holistically. It's looking at, well, here's a problem, here's a solution. It's interesting because for the first few years when I started to approach my body naturally, I took the same approach. It was very much, oh, I have a hormone problem. Well, I don't want to take synthetic stuff, so let me try and find a natural version. And so I was applying the same concepts, thinking that it would work. So
100%.
I was like, oh, well, my hormones are out of whack. I'll find a natural option for that instead. And then wondering why it didn't work, because it's just not the same thing. You cannot take a natural product and expect it to replace that, because the mechanisms in the body and the processes that happen with a natural approach are completely different.
Yes.
Like women write to me and they say, I've been taking the curcumin turmeric that you suggested for my pain and it's still sore. And I go, well, how long have you been taking it? Oh, 2 weeks, and it doesn't work. And it's sort of funny because it's just not the same mechanism. When you take a painkiller, you're literally cutting that response from the brain to the abdomen or wherever it is in the body, and just literally chopping that communication, saying, don't send me pain message. Mm-hmm. But when you're taking something like curcumin, you're actually addressing the inflammation in the body. And that can take a lot longer. And there's lots of other factors that cause inflammation. And it's not as simple as just, oh, let's just cut that mechanism, because as you and I know, inflammation is something that is throughout the whole body. And, generally it starts with your digestive system. And if you've been taking painkillers for so long, chances are you've probably messed that up in that journey.
You're literally like talking about my life right now. So one of I guess my only really huge big symptom that I ever had, and has nothing to do with fertility or your uterus, I had signs of an ulcer. They never diagnosed it properly. But I dealt with it for about 7 years, and it would flare up at any given time. And it was like, like I had to go lay down, have a glass of milk, and that was that. And I was talking to a friend, and she went, yeah, I can't take ibuprofen. It really messes with my stomach. And I was like, oh shit, man, I pop like 5 a day. Maybe that's my issue. And I stopped taking ibuprofen. And I mean, it's still there. I did some pretty hardcore damage, but it doesn't flare up, nearly as much. If I'm stressed or if I have a high dose of caffeine, I get it. But yeah, yeah, over the counter pain medication can really fuck you up. Let's just say that.
Yeah, big time. Interestingly, I found what actually helps quite a lot is licorice chewable tablets, the actual real licorice, not something you buy at the store, but like real licorice chewable tablets, because it's that mucilagenic that you're trying to protect the stomach lining. Mm-hmm. And cabbage juice.
Okay.
It's really effective. So yeah, if you ever having to take, like, because I've done that a few times, where you're like got a severe headache and you're just like, I just can't deal with this today, I have to take something, and then just like, oh bugger, I shouldn't have taken that because now my tummy hurts, and it's just like this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So I found that really, really helps, just to ease that swelling. Essentially it's too much acid buildup. Yes. And from those, and because that's there's no protection around the stomach lining, or not enough, that's when you get the issues. So
yeah. So for you and your story, you're sat at the doctor's office. You are now faced with bone issues from this medication, and that's your brain's going, okay, something's wrong. Was that the final straw, or did you kind of take a few more years to?
Quite a few more years, unfortunately. I think there was this disconnect. For women who maybe have been through surgeries, I think at some point you almost disconnect with your body. Like, it's, I don't want to know what's going on down there. And maybe it's also because when you have surgery, you're not there. You're not processing that in a real life scenario. You're not conscious. So it's very difficult to then comprehend, well, somebody's been in there and they've been doing a whole lot of stuff in there, and I have no idea what they've really been doing. Whereas if you had like cut yourself or something, your brain can comprehend that. It's like, oh, okay, I cut my foot, I can see the cut, it hurts, I get what I did there. But I think with surgery, especially when it's repeatedly, there's just this disconnect. And that was the case for me. I just felt like it wasn't me, it wasn't my body, it was this other part of my body, but I didn't even really want to look at it. And so I just didn't want to confront it at all. I was just like, just make the pain stop. I don't really care whatever. I just make the pain go away. And I landed up going on the pill for about 7 years, which did alleviate the pain to some degree. I still couldn't have kind of deep penetrative sex, like that still hurt. And that was kind of the sign to me that this still wasn't, because I wanted it to be like the cure or, the solution. Like because it was so much easier then, hey, I could, I need to stop drinking and I need to change my diet and I need to look at my, emotional well-being, and all that stuff was like way too complicated in your 20s. I was just like, forget it. I was partying, I was in London, having a big old rave, and, I was like not interested in doing any of that at all. It was just not the thing to do. We lived on pizza and pasta, and you don't have a lot of money, so it's do whatever, and literally had parties 4 nights a week, and that was my life. So I just didn't want to confront it. And so, yeah, I went through my whole 20s and, you know, had the surgery every year and a half. That was just my routine. I was like, oh, well, this is part of the condition. I just go in for surgery every year and a half. That was kind of my thinking. I didn't really question it. And it was only actually at the last surgery where I felt absolutely terrible. There was nobody there. Like my family had gone, oh, well, it's just another surgery. Like whatever. And so I was on my own. I felt incredibly emotional. The antibiotics hadn't agreed with me. So I had, really severe reaction from that. So I was literally throwing up, runny bottom, the whole lot at the same time trying to heal. If you've had abdominal surgery, it is sore, it's painful, and all that kind of reaction is not helping. And I remember just sitting there on the floor in the bathroom and just crying and just going, this is not living, this is just not worth it. And that was sort of the first inclination. It still wasn't the final straw. That was still me just thinking this was my fate, believing this was my life. One of the terms that I hear thrown around a lot within the endo community is I'm an endo sufferer. And that was the label that I stuck to and clung to in a way. I think a part of me quite liked being the victim, quite liked being able to get out of things if I didn't want to do them, or, I have a shitty job because I have endo. I don't have to take on the full-on stress of these bigger things in life that I actually secretly want to do, but I'm too scared to, so I think a part of me used it as a cop-out, as a way to get out of stuff. It was only when I moved to Australia I kind of started to go, okay, something's got to shift. And a lot of it had to do with actually emotional connections that I started to make. So recognizing that I had a lot of guilt around a brother that my family had, and he died when I was quite young. I was 6 at the time, and I blamed myself as the 6-year-old, so in my 6-year-old brain, I blamed myself for his death. That I had absolutely no way I could have caused the death, but it was in my 6-year-old brain. I believed that I hadn't prayed hard enough for him to live. And so I carried that guilt with me for my whole life, but I'd never recognized this until I started to look at sort of the emotional side of myself. And it was really interesting because once I started looking at that is when a lot of the pain went away. And so that's why a big part of what I do when I work with clients is look at the emotional component of how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive things that have happened to us, all of that stuff, because it's a big, big part of pain in the body. Guilt and pain is generally quite closely associated. And that was sort of the first inkling. And then I met my husband, and he sort of noticed these weird trends that I would do. Like I would get diarrhea and then I'd take something for the diarrhea, and then I would get constipation and then I'd take something for the constipation. And then I'd get a headache and I'd take something for that. And then my tummy would hurt, so then I'd take something for that. And it was just this, literally my handbag was just full of different drugs for different things. And he sort of questioned that. He was like, body is trying to expel something, or there's something that needs to happen here. Maybe there's some parasite or something going on. And then I was also living on painkillers, as you described, literally taking them every day. Like this is just normal. I didn't think anything of it. And I remember getting so bad that I couldn't actually go to the same pharmacies, because they would question, why am I back again for another 48 pack of Nurofen, And they would say, yeah, no, sorry, Melissa, I'm sorry, but we can't actually give you any more of that. Like you've already, had enough of those. And then I'd literally go to different pharmacies so that I could get my dose, like that's how bad it was. And once again, my husband sort of pointed this out, saying, it's not quite normal. Like you might want to kind of look at that. I mean, he was very gentle about it. Yeah. So, it wasn't like he kind of confronted me or anything, but yeah. And then when we moved to New Zealand is really when I started, and I just decided that no, this isn't cool. And got a lot of sort of inspiration from, at the time it was David Wolf. I mean, he was kind of the guy at the time, and Chris Carr, and all these kind of people, and sort of went, okay, let's see if I can figure out a way to heal myself. And initially I had a blog and I called it Cure Endometriosis. That was my mission. And I had no examples of anyone who'd achieved this, so to me it was like this far-reaching goal. And I remember just feeling a number of times like, who am I kidding, this isn't possible. And really, really feeling quite broken in my body, and really feeling like I was pushing and struggling the whole time, so I would do lots of things. I mean, I shifted my diet dramatically. I would took up yoga, did all these things, but it was kind of like a checklist, like all these things, I've got to do all these things. If I do all these things, then I'll be good, and if I veered off slightly, then suddenly the pain would come back, and I'd be like, oh no, I haven't been good enough, and it's almost like this ironic stress state. The perfectionist person, like, huh? That doesn't quite work. so yeah, and it's interesting because I just recently wrote a blog post about this, and it's so weird how like different people have different perspectives of things, and it's basically that blog post is talking about kind of unveiling this need for perfectionism and this need to be this perfect health person, and how the driver of that is actually contributing to ill health, which is sort of ironic, and it's interesting because people perceive it so weirdly. Sometimes you're going, huh? Like, how did you get that out of it? But anyway.
Yeah. I'm gonna make you step back, because I think what you said about holding on to that guilt from your 6-year-old, I think a lot of us do that without even knowing. And I know for me, my mom had a hysterectomy at 31. So in my head, I just thought, I'm going to really struggle to have kids. And I put that in my head. And there was no signs that I was going to struggle. I didn't have the same issues my mom was having. But when we started to try, I wasn't really surprised that I wasn't getting pregnant, because I knew I wasn't, I had put that into my head. But then on top of that, I feel like I was so insecure with myself as well, and didn't realize it, that I wasn't able to give myself permission to love myself mentally and physically. So I was beating myself up with drinking and, taking the painkillers and just eating shitty food. And none of this, all this was normal. I wasn't extreme, and I wasn't an alcoholic. I wasn't going to McDonald's every day, which is all normal eating. But in reality, I think I spent a lot of years punishing myself and not, having enough courage or enough emotion or enough, whatever you need to actually look at yourself and go, this isn't your fault. This is your guilt that you're taking on, this insecurity that you have. Getting over that, or realizing you have it in the first place and then working on it, is a really big step in any journey, but especially with infertility, because when you realize you're infertile, then that shit just gets piled onto you, right? So you have all your other emotional stuff, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm broken, like I can't get pregnant, this is, but just for you, releasing that, was that like your very first step of kind of knowing that you had a long journey to go? When you realized that you had this guilt, was it like a really big thing, this amazing, or was it like, oh wow, this is something I need to work on?
No, it was quite a big thing. I hadn't even died, but I didn't particularly remember anything around that. It was only through doing this emotional work that it kind of came up, and I kind of went, oh wow, that's because it was huge. I mean, for me it was huge, because one of the things that came out of was this belief that I wasn't enough. And I think a lot of us carry that, but for me it came from if I'd only prayed enough, then he may have lived. And then I felt this huge guilt because it affected obviously the whole family. And then I was trying to be the good daughter for my mom. And so it was this constant kind of trying to make my mom happy. And she was obviously very, she became quite withdrawn from having lost her son, and so I blame myself for that. And so I was constantly trying to be this good enough daughter. And so this I'm not enough message became very, very loud, and I took that across the board, all right, to, bosses and boyfriends and friends and you name it, everybody, I was not enough. I always had to do more. I had to, give more. And it wasn't me, myself was not enough. Like I had this belief that just being present wasn't enough. I had to prove myself in some way or give in some way or, I don't know. And so it was very difficult to, even with jobs, my first job, I was working in advertising. And I remember sort of having a colleague who was pretty much on the same level as me. We were both kind of came into the company at the same time. And I remember working like ridiculous hours. Like I would get there really early and I'd work really late and I'd be like always like doing and doing and doing. And she didn't. And yet she got promoted before I did, and I couldn't figure this out. Like it really frustrated me. And it was because I had this thing of not being enough. And so I would be so stressed out that I was just constantly, this push. And so because I was so stressed out, I didn't handle clients very well. I was always just like, yes, but blah, 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 and she would be all calm and the clients would totally love her and she would secure more clients because she was so calm with the other clients. And, and so it was sort of this ironic thing that I was pushing so hard and yet exactly what I was doing was counterintuitive to actually getting what I really wanted. And so that's another sort of sign that I had that, okay, this not being enough thing is actually not a positive at all. Like, because for a long time I clung to that. I'm a perfectionist. I am, I do more than everybody else and all this crap, So yeah.
And what did you do? What tool or who did you see to get this emotional stuff out?
At the time, it was kind of like EFT. It was sort of emotional freedom technique, but they combined it with other tools. So it's sort of hard to explain, but it was like basically they looked at your energy field and kind of assessed whether there was a heaviness around that and just kind of made you look at things and really just feel the full emotion. So in this scenario, they were like, well, just feel the full emotion of the pain that's in your body.
Yeah.
And let whatever comes up, come up. And so, I mean, it was intense. I wouldn't say it was an easy process. It was literally a weekend that you went, this was in Sydney, and you went away for the weekend and you literally just sat there feeling your pain. I mean, literally I felt like I was crying for 2 days, that was the whole thing, but through that, this vision came up with my brother and all of that. And then when I freed that from the body, it was just, I felt like a completely different person, and it was weird because after that, I really struggled to work for other people because I didn't have this need to please any in a way,
Yeah, exactly. And like I said before, I don't know if I got cut out. The connection's not great, but yeah, I think when you start dealing with infertility, all those emotions that you have from your past, whether you know or you don't know, the infertility just goes on top of it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Because there is a lot of this feeling around being broken.
Yeah.
A lot of women have this feeling of, well, if I can't produce, then my body's broken. And, it's sort of, and then you get into the whole area of the man being with your husband, are you enough of a woman? Because, like in cases with endometriosis, women have a lot of pain. So some of them have so much pain, having sex in certain positions isn't possible, and so then they start to feel a lot of that and guilt around giving enough to their husband or partner. I mean, there's a lot of statistics also around women with endo having sexual abuse in their history, I mean, that makes logical sense, that there would be kind of that, not to say all women with endo had that, but it's interesting to see these correlations Like I always notice correlations with, we found that if there is a lot of anxiety or pain around a mother figure or a strong woman figure in your life, it tends to settle on the left side of the body. Whereas if it's more on the right, it tends to be more of a male figure. So it's always interesting, because whenever I bring this up with my clients, they're like, oh my God, yeah, that's so true. So it's quite funny when you
Wow.
notice these connections. And
Yeah.
so when people say there's no emotional tie to Endo, I say no, there is definitely an emotional tie here, and you're just too scared to look at it, to be honest. Anxiety's through the roof, and to the point where, like, I'll recommend something to them, to a herb or whatever, and they will spend 2 days researching it and then come back to me and say, oh, no, but the herb says that it could have this reaction in the body. And I'm just like, chill out. Like, seriously, then that's what's actually contributing to poor health, is because you're in this constant sympathetic nervous system response. It's like the fight or flight, and you're in that constant state. You ain't gonna heal.
And it's so hard, like when you're in the depths of infertility, we get, the community gets really annoyed with people saying just relax or stop worrying or just let it happen. And you know it is the case. We do have to take a step back and stop hyper focusing on maybe all the negative that's going on in our life, or the time, all the timing or whatnot, and put that focus on just better issues. If you want to think about having a baby, then visualize you're being pregnant and having a baby. So yeah, it's this weird kind of thing that we up and down with. Like, we can't stop thinking about it, but we know we need to. But it's just putting your focus somewhere else, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I often say to women, who are trying to get pregnant, why don't we take that energy that you have, that nerve, that wanting to look after something, and put it into something else. Join a charity, do something for kids in your local area. It doesn't really matter, but or just get a pet, even. Something else to give you that desire to be fulfilled, because that's the desire, that nurturing desire that we have as women. I mean, yeah, and it is about shifting that constant chitter chatter, waking up in the morning with this constant, I'm broken, I'm not getting pregnant, I'm never going to have children. All of that stuff is not helping.
No.
Message straight down to your body going, okay, sure, that's what you wanted. So actually shifting that, and so working on things like gratitude, looking at, okay, in what way is my body amazing, in what way am I amazing, what am I offering to the world as I am right now, how is my life fantastic as it is right now, rather than this, oh, my life will only be perfect once I have a baby. This kind of mindset. And I think a lot of women do that. It's like, oh, my life will only be perfect once I have a baby. And what I found really sad is, oftentimes with endometriosis, there's this huge thing, because women get told, I mean, I got told this, your chances of getting pregnant are very, very low. So you better hurry up, because, every year that passes, it's going to get harder and harder. And so there's that pressure there. Plus, of course, it's this, their body isn't necessarily physically ready to have a child, so you see these cases of women having IVF treatments and, forcing the issue, when what the body really needs is to heal. And, it's about getting rid of toxins in the body, and instead of pumping the body full of synthetic hormones, I mean, through the roof, kids with food sensitivities through the roof, all of these things. And it's a lot to do with what's in the mom. What are we carrying around that we're passing on to that kid? And so I really encourage women to do, because in our program we have a big detox section. I really encourage women to do that first before they even try and have kids, because you're giving your child a much better chance in life if it's not pumped full of dioxin issues are going on, what parasites are in your gut or whatever. So that's sort of where I prefer to focus initially, is getting all of that stuff sorted. And it generally makes for an easier pregnancy and a happier child.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those issues are like
So,
for a whole nother podcast. I mean, we
um,
can, yeah, go off on that. But yeah, it's super important to just really step back and look at yourself first. You know, you've got, you know, unhealthy people have babies all the time. It doesn't make it right. So
mm,
if you are, you know, infertility is a symptom of you not being healthy. You know, women with endometriosis can have children. That's not, you know, but it's yeah, it's your body has a very good way of saying, I don't want you to have a baby right now.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
have an IVF baby and I tricked my body into getting pregnant, and I have a natural pregnancy as well. And so I know both ends of it. I know how hard it is to just want to be pregnant and just get there and skip the, you know, the necessary steps that you need to um, have. You don't need to. I don't want to say you need to, but you know, it's a very different
Approach, yeah.
approach.
Mm,
Yes.
mm.
Um, and like I said, it's a for a different podcast, but epigenetics, it's a real thing, you know, and it is going to be a common thing in the next 10 years. And I think a lot of people are going to go, whoa, that's huge.
Mm.
Let's take a step back because we are all about you and your journey on this episode. But so you figured out you needed to make some big changes. Like me, probably you just went and searched everywhere. Luckily, there was some amazing people out there talking about diet, lifestyle, mindset, and how those can all have a huge impact. Was it hard? Was the struggle real, making those connections and actually living a new life, right? And becoming a new person?
I actually didn't find it that hard to begin with. It was interesting because I'm very much, once I make a decision, then I'm fine. It was getting to that decision that was the hard part. Um, I find that for me, it was very much, okay, I'm doing this thing. And then I literally would just try whatever, you know, whatever came my way. I actually had this statement that I would say to myself, I'm being guided towards my next step. And I literally would say this every day because it's overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. And there's a lot of information out there and there's a lot of different people saying different things. And sometimes it contradicts itself. And so, you know, you can get to a point where you're like, I just don't know what to do anymore, you know. But I literally would say that. And it would help me quite a lot in terms of going, okay, which direction do I want to go with it? You know, just eat healthy, or do I want to look at my emotional stuff now, you know? And sometimes we're not ready, you know, sometimes it's looking at yourself and looking at what's going on emotionally and all that chitter chatter that's going on isn't necessarily where you are right now. You might be at a point where like, I can't even eat right, you know, like that's sort of, and that's why our process is we start with, it's interesting because once you start eating healthier, you feel better, you have more energy, you have more mental clarity. And so then when it gets to the point where you are ready to look at the mind stuff, you're stronger in yourself already, and you feel like you've already made some headway, you know. So for me, I kind of went through the diet side first, and I really was quite disciplined. I mean, you know, type A personality, you know, went all the way, no sugar at all. I mean, now I'm a lot more lax, you know, it's like, yeah, but I was like, no sugar, no vegetable oils at all. Like, no, you know, if it had canola oil in the lead ingredients, I didn't eat it, you know, like it was just, it's super, super strict about it. And then I incorporated yoga, and I did feel quite a significant shift. But then it was sort of looking more at the mind body stuff, coming back to loving yourself, which was a huge, huge part for me. And then looking at, okay, what toxins are in the body? Because, I mean, there's kind of, I look at with endometriosis, there seems to be this huge kind of imbalance. So not enough nutrients coming into the body and some kind of heavy toxin load. And when I say toxin, it can be broad. I mean, it could be, you know, parasites, bacteria overgrowth. I place those under toxins because they all release toxins into the body. But that's basically what we work on. So actually correcting that. So getting your nutritional balance back is called cell saturation. Is we don't go, oh, well, stick to this diet and you'll be healed. It's really, what does your body need? Let's provide your body with the tools that it needs. And it'll sort itself out. Like, it knows what it's doing. It's not silly, you know, actually trusting in nature and trusting in your body that it can heal. And that's kind of the goal. So that's what I did. I basically gave my body every single tool that looked at, you know, how stress was affecting me, shifted what I did for a living, like literally, you know, just everything was about making sure that my body was in the best possible environment to heal. And so yeah, it was quite a big journey, but you know, I'm now at a point where I don't have pain. I can live a normal life. I can go away with my husband, and you know, it's not a factor. And so that's why I want more women to know that there is a way forward, because unfortunately there's a lot of negative stigma around endo, and you know, women just believing that this is their fate, as I did. And more women who are doing this naturally and who are getting better outcomes, you know. So
Yeah. And I think with your guidance and, there's so much more knowledge out there now, it's not going to take as long. I had a 9-year infertility journey only because 4 years I didn't know, I was just led by the medical world and them telling me there's nothing you can do. We don't know what's wrong. You're perfectly fine. You can't improve your situation. After our first IVF showed that we had bad embryo quality. So I think now for a lot of women, it's not going to be as hard. You still have to do it. You doing it is hard. You doing your emotional and physical stuff is your own battles, but you're not going to be searching out for all the answers because we've done that, right?
yeah, having somebody there that you can lean on. I didn't have that. I literally went on it on my own, and I went, okay, cool, I can see Chris Carr's doing well because she had a diagnosis of cancer, and obviously that's whatever she's doing is working for her. So I always had these kind of examples of people who had overcome other stuff.
Yeah.
Never had anyone who'd specifically addressed endometriosis, and that's sort of was quite scary, at times, because I'd do a cleanse or something, and I'd be like completely, like I did a liver flush, which it's horrendous. It really is quite taxing on the body, and thinking that this would be my cure-all, this would solve all my problems, and actually feeling quite sufficiently worse for doing it, and have to struggle and suffer and be in a position where they're actually putting their body under more pressure and more harm, and raising cortisol and more of that stress response, which isn't positive, so
yeah, exactly. So we talk about hindsight being a bitch. With all your knowledge, what you've experienced, what would be your one tip for anyone dealing with infertility and endometriosis at the same time?
I think the biggest thing is to shift your mindset. So instead of looking at it as I'm broken, there's all these things wrong with me, now I have to change my diet, I have to do yoga, I have to do these cleanses, and I have to look at my mindset. Okay, my body has sent me this message that something's not quite working. It's time for me to actually look at my health, look at myself, and nurture myself, look after myself. So, look at it as a little child that's looking for attention, looking for love, and its way of asking you imbalances or infertility or whatever it is, and saying, hey, pay attention, I need some help here. And actually stopping and going, okay, what does my body need? How can I love my body? How can I love myself? And so it's really nurturing from choices can you make in terms of your food that really support your body. How can you move your body in a way that supports you, rather than this pushing scenario of I've got to go running because that's what I've been told is what's exercise. How does that really support you? How is that really what you need right now? And in some cases, I mean, generally I've got fertility issues just because it is quite high sort of cortisol driven. Generally it releases a lot of cortisol, so I tend to recommend women do something more gentle and more present, so really becoming in tune with your body and how your body feels, and kind of loving on your body. Like I found for me, yoga is a very spiritual practice of actually becoming very aware of your body, and looking at your toes and looking at your legs, and actually loving on your body, which is it's something we women just not very good at. We tend to always go, oh, if only my bum wasn't so big, or oh, if only this wasn't there and that wasn't there, and whatever. So it's really about tuning inward and saying, how do I nurture myself? How do I look after myself? And it is a choice. So I choose to eat well. I choose, to do these things that can provide for my body. And, when it comes to infertility, look at it as your body is your house. And how can you make that house as warm and welcoming for that baby to move into? If it's ridden with toxins, no baby's going to want to move in there. It's got to be warm. It's got to be cozy. It's got to be a loving space. If you've constantly got all this negative chitter chatter in your brain, I don't want to move in there. It's like nasty stuff that you're telling yourself. Baby's not going to want to move in there. So really visualizing it as this home that you're creating, and how you can make it as warm and welcoming as possible.
Yeah, it's great advice. Easier said than done. It takes a lot to get there, as we both know. But it's it's not the be all and end all of getting pregnant, because I know a lot of people get like frustrated when they're told that. But as we said before, it's life changing. When you become pregnant, or if you are going through a surrogacy, or even if you're going through adoption, or even if you choose not to have a child, those anxieties of all those situations are going to almost like get bigger, right? And if you can just control that now, why you don't actually have any of those worries in your life, you're going to be just a little bit more happier with the outcome, no matter which way it goes. Let my listeners know where they can find you.
So head on over to endoempowered.com, and you can check out, we've got a presentation all around endometriosis and how we address it naturally. So it gives you a lot more depth. And if to support women in a group scenario, so we can all be there for each other, sharing the journey. And so we're opening that up very shortly. So if you feel called to, so we literally go through my reach technique, which you can find out more on my website. But that's the process, and it's amazing. It's really transformative for a lot of women.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. And I love how, it's not just infertility, it's endometriosis. And I think that is its own set of problems. And I think your technique is going to change many lives. So thank you so much for coming on. All the links are going to be in the show notes. And next time I come to New Zealand, we're getting a cup of coffee, or maybe a drink. Depends on how we feel.
That would be lovely.
All right. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you so much.
A few more things before you go. You can find all the links to anything talked about on this podcast, especially how to connect with our special guest. While you're down there, make sure you leave us a rating or a review. It would totally help this podcast out. If you would like to connect with me more, head over to the website. It's mymindfulme.com. There's a free membership over on the website where you can connect with like-minded people and really push your journey forward. We also have all the videos that I do up there for you, and the newsletter goes out about 2-3 times a month. And we also have pre-registration for the Fertility Reconnect course. It's a 6-week course to help you really dial in what's going on in your body, what foods you can and cannot eat, and we're going to dig deep into the mental blocks you're having and how it could be affecting your fertility health. So that's it. Thank you once again for joining us on the Infertile Diagnosis, and have a beautiful day.